I was 65 years old when my daughter told me I wasn't good enough anymore. The words didn't come out exactly like that, of course. They never do when someone wants to break your heart. Emily stood in my kitchen, and she looked at me with this expression I'd never seen before. It was pity mixed with something sharper. Disappointment, maybe. Or judgment. Mom, I don't know how to say this without hurting your feelings, but Diane just does things differently. Better, I guess. More modern. More, I don't know. Put together? Diane was her mother-in-law. The woman her husband Brandon had come from, and apparently the woman Emily now wished had raised her instead of me. Before we continue, please subscribe and hit that notification bell, and let us know where in the world you're watching from in the comments. Now, back to my story. I was pulling a lasagna out of the oven, Emily's favorite, the one I'd made every year for her birthday since she was 6 when she said those words. My hands were wrapped in those old oven mitts with the faded sunflower pattern, the ones Emily had picked out at a yard sale when she was 12 because she said they looked happy. The ceramic dish was heavy in my hands. Steam rose up, carrying the smell of garlic and oregano and melted cheese. I could feel the heat through the mitts, could feel something else too, a different kind of heat, rising from somewhere deep in my chest. Put together, I repeated, my voice steady even though my hands had started to shake. I set the lasagna down on the stovetop. Carefully, precisely. What does that mean, exactly? Emily sighed. And that sigh, God, that sigh contained everything. Impatience, frustration, the burden of having to explain something so obvious to someone so hopelessly behind the times. It means she knows how to do things right, Mom. She has a beautiful home, she dresses well, she knows how to entertain. When Brandon and I host dinner parties, I look at what you taught me, and it's all so outdated. Diane offered to teach me her way of doing things, and honestly, it's been a relief. I turned off the oven, removed the mitts, folded them neatly and placed them on the counter. My hands had stopped shaking, I noticed. Everything inside me had gone very still, like the moment before a storm when even the birds stopped singing. I see, I said. Don't be like that. Emily crossed her arms. She was wearing a cream-colored cashmere sweater that probably cost more than my weekly grocery budget, paired with designer jeans and boots that clicked authoritatively on my linoleum floor. When had she started dressing like that? When had the girl who lived in band t-shirts and ripped jeans transformed into this glossy stranger? I knew you'd take it personally. This is exactly why I didn't want to say anything. Then why did you? She looked uncomfortable now, shifting her weight from one expensive boot to the other. Because I need you to understand something. Brandon and I are hosting Thanksgiving this year, but we always, and Diane is going to help me prepare everything. She's already planned the menu, ordered the decorations, arranged for the caterer. I'll need you to just come as a guest. Don't bring anything. Don't try to help in the kitchen. Diane and I have it under control. The kitchen felt too small suddenly. Too hot. I could smell the lasagna getting cold behind me. All that effort congealing into something no one would eat now. Don't bring anything, I said slowly. To Thanksgiving, the holiday I've hosted for 33 years. See, this is what I'm talking about. You're making it about you instead of being happy that I'm growing and learning new things. Emily grabbed her purse, a designer bag that I'd seen in store windows, the kind with a price tag that made my stomach hurt. Diane says this is typical behavior for mothers who can't accept that their daughters are moving on to better things. She said you might react this way. She left before I could respond. The door closed with a soft click that sounded louder than a slam would have. I stood alone in my too small kitchen with my outdated appliances and my unfashionable life, staring at a lasagna no one wanted. That night, I did something I hadn't done in years. I poured myself a glass of wine, cheap wine from a box, because that's what my budget allowed, and I sat in the dark living room, letting myself remember. I remembered the year Emily's father left. She was 8. He'd found someone younger, someone without stretch marks and exhaustion lines, someone who didn't smell like baby formula and burnt dinner. The divorce left me with this house, small, old, but paid off, and enough child support to keep us fed but never comfortable. I remembered working 2 jobs. Days at the insurance company, filing claims and answering phones until my voice went hoarse. Evenings at the grocery store, scanning items and bagging purchases while standing on feet that had already walked miles at my first job. Emily would do homework at the store's break room, quiet and patient, never complaining that other kids had mothers who could help with science projects and drive them to soccer practice. I remembered every birthday party I'd thrown on a shoestring budget. Homemade cakes because bakery cakes cost too much. Games in the backyard instead of renting bounce houses. Party favors from the dollar store, wrapped in tissue paper I'd smoothed out and reused from the year before. Emily had always seemed happy. She'd always hugged me tight and said, "This is the best birthday ever, Mom," and I'd believed her. I remembered putting myself through night school, studying for my real estate license after she went to bed, because I wanted to give her more than hand-me-down clothes and apologetic smiles. It took me 3 years to get that license. 3 years of exhaustion and coffee and borrowed textbooks. But I did it. I built a small business. Nothing fancy, but enough to pay for Emily's college. Enough that she graduated without debt, unlike most of her friends. Had she forgotten all of that? Or had Diane's granite countertops and catered dinner parties somehow erased 26 years of sacrifice? The wine tasted bitter. I poured the rest down the sink. The signs had been there for months. I realized now. I'd just been too busy trying to be a good mother to see them clearly. It started small, the way poison always does. Little comments here and there, so tiny you could convince yourself you'd misheard or misunderstood. 6 months ago, Emily had come over to help me plant the spring garden. We were kneeling in the dirt, our hands covered in soil, when she mentioned that Diane had hired a professional landscaping company. "Her yard looks like something out of a magazine," Emily said, pressing marigold seeds into the earth with practiced fingers. Fingers I'd taught to garden. "She has this whole outdoor living space with a fire pit and string lights. It's beautiful. This is beautiful too," I'd said, gesturing to our modest garden beds. "Don't you think?" Emily had smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Sure, Mom, in a rustic kind of way." Rustic. That was the word she'd chosen. Not charming, not homey. Rustic, with all its implications of primitive and unrefined. Then there was the time she'd asked to borrow my serving dishes for a dinner party. I'd carefully packed my good plates, the china set I'd inherited from my mother, not expensive but treasured, and driven them to her apartment. When I arrived, Diane was already there, unpacking boxes of elegant modern dinnerware. "Oh, don't worry about those," Emily had said, barely glancing at the dishes I'd wrapped so carefully. "Diane brought her set. It'll match the aesthetic better." I'd driven home with my mother's china still in boxes, and I'd cried in the car for 20 minutes before I could trust myself to go inside. The worst part was how Emily had started canceling our standing lunch dates. For years, we'd met every other Wednesday at the little cafe downtown, nothing fancy, just sandwiches and soup and conversation. But over the past few months, she'd canceled more times than we'd actually met. "Diane and I are taking a cooking class. Diane invited me to her book club. Diane's teaching me about wine pairing. Always Diane. Never my mother-in-law or Brandon's mom. Just Diane," said with a reverence that made my chest ache. I'd tried to be understanding. I told myself this was normal, that daughters often bonded with their mothers-in-law, that I should be happy Emily had another woman in her life who cared about her. But understanding didn't make it hurt less when my own daughter stopped returning my calls, stopped asking my advice, stopped seeing me as anything more than a relic from a past she was trying to upgrade away from. The lasagna incident wasn't the first time Emily had criticized my cooking either. A month earlier, she'd come over for dinner and barely touched the pot roast I'd made. "It's a little heavy," she'd said, pushing food around her plate. "Diane's been teaching me about lighter, more sophisticated meals. Mediterranean diet, you know? Better for you." "I didn't realize there was anything wrong with pot roast," I'd said. "There's not. It's just old-fashioned. Brandon's used to different food now." Brandon, her husband of 2 years, a man I'd welcomed into our family with open arms and genuine affection. A nice enough guy, though quiet. Too quiet, maybe. The kind of quiet that made you wonder what he was really thinking behind those polite smiles. I'd paid for half their wedding. Emily's father had contributed some. but most of it came from me, from savings I'd built up slowly, carefully, over years of denying myself new clothes and nice vacations. I'd wanted Emily to have the wedding of her dreams, even if it meant I'd have to work a few more years before retirement. The wedding had been beautiful. Diane had offered to help with the planning, which somehow morphed into Diane taking over most of the decisions. The flowers I'd suggested were replaced with more elegant arrangements. The simple cake I'd chosen was swapped for an elaborate 5-tier confection. Even the mother of the bride dress I'd picked out, a modest blue dress that I'd felt pretty in, was vetoed in favor of something Diane selected. Something more refined, Emily had said. I'd worn the refined dress. I'd smiled in all the photos. I'd danced with Emily's father and made small talk with Diane and pretended my heart wasn't breaking with every improvement that erased my presence from my daughter's special day. At the reception, I'd overheard Diane talking to some of the guests. "It's remarkable what we were able to accomplish," she'd said, her voice carrying across the room. "Emily had some very, let's say, traditional ideas, but I think we elevated everything beautifully, don't you? Traditional, rustic, old-fashioned, heavy, different words, same message, not good enough." I didn't sleep that night after Emily left with her lasagna rejection still hanging in the air. Instead, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, feeling something shift inside me, something that had been bending for months finally straightened, hardened, turned into something else. I'd spent my entire adult life being someone's support system, my ex-husband's, until he decided to leave. My daughter's, always and completely. I'd worked myself to exhaustion, sacrificed my own dreams, put everyone else's needs before my own. And for what? To be told I wasn't modern enough? Wasn't put together enough? Wasn't enough? Period? By the time dawn broke through my bedroom curtains, I'd made a decision. I wasn't going to fight for Emily's approval anymore. I wasn't going to compete with Diane's designer clothes and catered parties. I wasn't going to shrink myself into an apologetic shadow at the edges of my own daughter's life. I was going to step back, all the way back, and I was going to let Emily discover, on her own, what she'd actually lost. The first thing I did was cancel my phone service upgrade. I'd been planning to get a newer phone so I could video chat with Emily more easily, but I didn't need that now. Instead, I put that money aside. The second thing I did was take myself off the family group chat. Emily, Brandon, and I had a thread where we shared photos and made plans. I left it quietly, without announcement. If they noticed, they didn't say anything. The third thing I did was start saying no. Emily called 3 days later, her voice cheerful and expectant. "Hey Mom, I need a favor. Can you watch our dog this weekend? Brandon and I are going wine tasting with Diane and Robert, and the kennel is booked." Their dog was a high-maintenance golden doodle named Biscuit, who had separation anxiety and a tendency to destroy furniture when left alone. I'd dog-sat him a dozen times before, always happy to help, even though Biscuit had once eaten my favorite cardigan and twice knocked over my grandmother's lamp. "No," I said simply. There was a pause. "What?" "I can't watch Biscuit this weekend. I have plans." "What plans?" She sounded genuinely confused, as if the idea of me having plans that didn't revolve around her needs was incomprehensible. "Personal plans," I said. "I'm not available. But Mom, we've already paid for the tour, and Diane specifically chose this weekend because it's the peak season for—" "I'm sure Diane can help you find a solution," I said, and I hung up before she could guilt me into changing my mind. My hands were shaking, but this time it wasn't from hurt. It was from something that felt oddly like freedom. I didn't actually have plans that weekend. I spent Saturday reading a novel I'd been meaning to get to for months, and Sunday I went to the farmer's market and bought myself fresh flowers, sunflowers, like the pattern on my old oven mitts. I put them in a vase on my kitchen table and looked at them every time I walked past, reminding myself that I could do things for myself, that I was allowed to matter. Emily didn't call me back that weekend, or the next week. The silence should have bothered me, but instead, it felt like breathing room. 3 weeks later, I got an email. Not a call, not even a text. An email. "Hi, Mom," it began. with a formality that would have been appropriate for a business acquaintance but felt cold coming from my own daughter. I wanted to reach out about Thanksgiving. As I mentioned, Brandon and I are hosting this year with Diane's help. Dinner will be at 4 p.m. Please don't bring any dishes or try to contribute to the meal. Diane has everything planned and she prefers to control the kitchen. Just bring yourself. Also, we're asking everyone to dress nicely, think country club casual. Diane is having a photographer come to take family portraits. See you then, Emily. I read the email 3 times. Each time, different words jumped out at me. Just bring yourself. Diane prefers to control the kitchen. Country club casual. The email didn't ask how I was, didn't mention the fact that we hadn't spoken in weeks, didn't acknowledge that this would be the first Thanksgiving in 3 decades that I wouldn't be cooking the turkey my daughter had loved since childhood. I hit reply and typed, "Thank you for the invitation. I'll plan to attend." I didn't ask what country club casual meant. I didn't offer to help anyway. I just accepted the terms of my daughter's new life, where I was a guest instead of the host, a visitor instead of family. The next few weeks passed in strange, slow motion. I went to work, sold a few houses, came home to my quiet house and biscuit-free furniture. I started taking a watercolor painting class at the community center on Thursday evenings, something I'd always wanted to try but never had time for. I wasn't particularly good at it, but I enjoyed the peaceful focus of brush on paper, the way colors bloomed and blended into something that was mine alone. I made new friends in the class. Linda, a retired teacher with a wry sense of humor. Patricia, a widow who decided to try new things after her husband passed. We started getting coffee after class, the 3 of us, and they actually listened when I talked. They asked about my life, my work, my thoughts on things that had nothing to do with being someone's mother or someone's support system. "Your daughter's getting married to the wrong person," Linda said bluntly one evening, after I'd carefully mentioned some of what had been happening. "The mother-in-law, I mean. That's who she's really married to." "Linda," Patricia gasped. But she was smiling. "What? It's true. I've seen it 100 times in my 40 years of teaching. Kids who get so desperate to belong to their new family that they forget about the people who raised them. It usually doesn't end well." "What happens?" I asked. Linda shrugged. "They wake up. Eventually. When the shine wears off and reality sets in, the question is whether they wake up before or after they've destroyed their relationships with the people who actually loved them unconditionally." I thought about that conversation for days afterward. Part of me hoped Linda was right, that Emily would wake up and realize what she'd given up. But another part of me, the part that was getting stronger every day, wondered if I cared anymore. Or rather, if I cared enough to keep putting myself through this pain waiting for my daughter to decide I was worth her time again. Thanksgiving approached like a storm on the horizon. I bought a new outfit, not country club casual, because I didn't know what that meant and refused to ask. Just a simple navy dress that made me feel confident. I got my hair done at the salon, something I rarely spent money on. When I looked in the mirror, I saw a woman who looked my present, solid, not invisible. The morning of Thanksgiving, my phone rang, Emily's number. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. "Mom." Her voice sounded strained. "I need your help." Those 4 words. After weeks of silence, after emails instead of calls, after being demoted to just a guest status, she needed my help. "What's wrong?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. The caterer canceled. Something about a kitchen fire at their facility. "Diane is freaking out. We've got 16 people coming in 5 hours, and I don't know how to cook a turkey." Her voice rose with each word, panic bleeding through. "Can you come early? Can you help us fix this?" I looked at my reflection in the hallway mirror. The woman looking back at me didn't look like someone who rescued people who'd spent months telling her she wasn't good enough. "Emily," I said slowly, "you told me you and Diane had everything under control. You told me not to bring anything, not to help in the kitchen. I know, but this is an emergency. Please, Mom, we need you. We need you. Not, I need you. Not, I was wrong. Not even, I'm sorry. Just a demand, an expectation that I would drop everything and save them, because that's what I'd always done." "Where's Diane?" I asked. She's here, but she's upset. She doesn't know how to cook a whole Thanksgiving dinner from scratch. She's used to having caterers. Of course she was. Diane of the perfect house and perfect clothes and perfect everything, all of it purchased, none of it built with her own hands. Emily, I said quietly. I was asked to come as a guest at 4 p.m. That's what I'll do. I'll arrive at 4, dressed nicely, ready for photos. If you and Diane need to figure out the food, that's between you and Diane. Are you seriously saying no right now? On Thanksgiving? I'm saying that I'll honor the invitation I was given. You made it very clear what my role was supposed to be today. I'm respecting your wishes. This is unbelievable. Her voice had gone sharp, angry. You're actually going to let us fail because your feelings are hurt? That's so selfish, Mom. So petty. Selfish. Petty. 2 more words to add to the collection. Outdated. Old-fashioned. Rustic. Heavy. Traditional. And now selfish and petty. I'll see you at 4, I said, and I ended the call. My hands were steady. My heart was racing, but not from anxiety, from something that felt like power, like reclamation. I took my time getting ready. I did my makeup carefully. I wrapped a simple hostess gift, a bottle of wine. Nothing expensive, exactly the kind of gesture expected from a guest. At 3:55 p.m., I drove to Emily and Brandon's house, a beautiful modern townhouse in the new development on the west side of town. Diane and her husband Robert lived 3 doors down. Of course. I'd heard all about it during the months when Emily still talked to me. The house was chaos when I arrived. Through the windows, I could see people rushing back and forth. The smell of something burning hit me as soon as Brandon opened the door, his face flushed and his shirt spotted with what looked like gravy. "Thank God you're here," he said, which was more words than he'd usually spoken to me at once. I stepped inside, taking in the scene. The dining room table was set beautifully. Diane's influence, no doubt. Expensive linens, elegant place settings, a centerpiece that probably cost more than my weekly grocery budget. But the kitchen beyond was a disaster. Diane stood at the stove, her cream-colored silk blouse splattered with food, her carefully styled hair coming undone. She was stirring something frantically while snapping orders at Emily, who looked near tears as she tried to wrestle a turkey into the oven. "Diane," I said evenly, "Happy Thanksgiving." She spun around, and I saw something I'd never seen before in her perfectly composed face. Desperation. "Oh, thank God. Catherine, you have to help us. This is a complete disaster. I don't understand what went wrong. I've never had to actually cook before. And Emily doesn't know anything useful. And, actually," I interrupted, setting my wine bottle on the counter, "I'm here as a guest. You told Emily that you preferred to control the kitchen. I'm just here to enjoy the meal." Diane's mouth fell open. Behind her, something on the stove started to smoke. "You can't be serious," she said, completely serious. I smiled, the kind of smile that didn't reach my eyes. I would never want to overstep or make things uncomfortable. "I know how important it is to you that everything be done your way." Emily appeared in the kitchen doorway, her face blotchy from crying. "Mom, please, I'm sorry, okay? Is that what you want to hear? I'm sorry. Now will you help?" "Sorry for what? Specifically?" I asked. She stared at me like I'd grown a second head. For whatever I did to make you mad." "That's not an apology, Emily. That's just words to manipulate me into doing what you want." "I don't have time for this," she practically screamed. "We have guests arriving in 15 minutes, and everything is ruined, and you're standing there like some kind of martyr." "Catherine." Robert's voice cut through the tension. Diane's husband had appeared from somewhere, looking as perfectly put together as always in his expensive sweater and pressed pants. "Perhaps you could see your way to helping, just this once, for Emily's sake. For Emily's sake. Not for my sake. Not because they'd been wrong. For Emily's sake. As if I was obligated to rescue my daughter from the consequences of her own choices. I looked around the kitchen at the smoking stove, the raw turkey, the various bowls of ingredients that Diane clearly didn't know what to do with. I looked at Emily's desperate face, and Diane's outraged expression, and Robert's entitled expectation that I would, of course, fix this mess. And I made a choice. "I'll help," I said quietly. The relief in the room was palpable. Emily rushed toward me, but I held up my hand. I'll help on one condition. Everyone leaves the kitchen except Emily. And Emily, you're going to listen to everything I say and do exactly what I tell you. No corrections, no suggestions, no mentioning what Diane would do instead. That's ridiculous, Diane sputtered. This is my grandson's home. I have every right. Those are my terms, I said flatly. You can accept them, or you can figure out how to feed 16 people on your own. There was a long silence. Through the window, I could see cars starting to pull up outside. The guests were arriving. Fine, Emily said, her voice small. Everyone out, please. Diane looked like she wanted to argue, but Robert took her arm and guided her toward the living room. Brandon followed, leaving just Emily and me in the disaster zone that was supposed to be Diane's triumph. Okay, I said, rolling up my sleeves. First, that turkey isn't going to be ready in time, but I see you have chicken breasts in the fridge. We're going to do something simple and elegant instead. Hand me that cutting board. For the next hour and a half, Emily and I worked. I showed her how to butterfly the chicken breasts, how to make a quick herb butter, how to salvage Diane's attempted mashed potatoes by adding cream and adjusting the seasoning. I walked her through a simple but beautiful green bean almondine, showed her how to make gravy that didn't taste like flour paste, taught her the trick to bakery-style rolls using store-bought dough and an egg wash. We didn't talk about anything except the food. Emily followed instructions without question, and I watched her hands, the same hands I'd taught to knead bread dough, to frost birthday cakes, to crack eggs without getting shells in the bowl. She hadn't forgotten. She'd just been convinced that what she knew wasn't good enough. When the meal was finally ready, not the elaborate feast Diane had planned, but a simple, delicious Thanksgiving dinner, Emily looked at me with tears in her eyes. I couldn't have done this without you, she said. No, I agreed. You couldn't have, but you could have asked me to help weeks ago. You could have respected what I had to offer instead of deciding it wasn't modern enough. I know, she whispered. I'm so sorry, Mom. Really sorry. Not the manipulation kind. The real kind. I nodded. We'll talk about it later. Right now, you have guests waiting. The dinner itself was awkward. Diane kept making little comments about how the meal wasn't what she'd planned, how unfortunate it was that things hadn't worked out. She complimented the food in a way that somehow made it sound like it was barely acceptable. When the photographer arrived for the family portraits, she positioned herself next to Emily in every shot, literally edging me out of the frame until Brandon quietly but firmly asked her to let me stand with my daughter. But I noticed something during that endless meal. I noticed the other guests, Brandon's aunts and uncles. A few family friends kept complimenting the food. Simple, they said. Comforting. Delicious. One of Brandon's aunts even pulled me aside. I have to tell you, she said, her voice low. This is the first Thanksgiving with this family that's felt like an actual Thanksgiving. Last year, everything was so sterile. So perfect it wasn't even enjoyable. This feels like a real meal. Thank you. I also noticed Emily watching her mother-in-law throughout the evening, her expression growing more and more troubled. Every time Diane made a cutting remark about the food or tried to take credit for something she hadn't done, Emily's face tightened a little more. After dinner, while people were lingering over coffee and pie store-bought, but nobody seemed to mind, Emily found me in the kitchen where I was quietly packing up my things. Mom, she said, can we talk? Really talk? Not tonight, I said. You have guests. But yes, we need to talk. Soon. She hugged me then, and it felt different from her usual hugs. Tighter, more desperate. Like she was afraid I might disappear if she let go. I love you, she said. I've been so stupid. You've been dazzled, I corrected. There's a difference. But Emily, I need you to understand something. I can't keep being the person who only matters when you need something. I can't keep being pushed aside and then pulled back in during emergencies. I love you, but I love myself too, and I deserve better than that. She nodded against my shoulder, and I felt her tears soaking through my dress. I drove home alone that night, exhausted but strangely energized. I'd set a boundary. I'd stood up for myself. And I'd shown Emily and Diane that the things I had to offer weren't outdated or insufficient. They were real, earned through years of experience and love, but I knew this wasn't over. People like Diane don't let go of their influence easily. And Emily had spent months being slowly programmed to see me as less than. One Thanksgiving dinner wasn't going to undo all of that damage. I had no idea how right I was. The next few weeks brought an uneasy peace. Emily called more often, though the conversations were stilted, both of us navigating around the hurt that still lingered. She didn't mention Diane as much, and when she did, there was a note of caution in her voice, like she was testing to see if I'd react. I didn't. I just listened. 2 weeks after Thanksgiving, Emily asked if we could have lunch at our old cafe, our standing Wednesday tradition that had been abandoned for Diane's cooking classes and wine tastings. I met her there on a gray December afternoon. She was already seated when I arrived. 2 cups of coffee on the table, mine made the way I liked it, with cream and 1 sugar. That small gesture of remembering felt significant. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," Emily said after we'd ordered. "About everything. About how I've treated you." "Okay," I said neutrally. "Diane makes everything look so easy, so perfect." When I first started getting close to her, it felt like I was finally learning how to be a real adult, how to have a real life, not just the scraping by life I grew up with. She flinched at her own words. "God, that sounds awful. I don't mean it like." "I know what you mean," I said quietly. "You wanted what she had. The nice things, the ease, the confidence." "Yes, and she was so generous with it, always offering to help, to teach me, to include me in her world. I felt special, chosen." Emily stirred her coffee, not meeting my eyes. "But lately, I've started noticing things." "What things?" "The way she talks about other people, about you especially. I thought she was just being honest, helping me see things clearly. But Mom, she says things that are kind of cruel, and she does it in this sweet voice, like she's concerned, but the message underneath is always the same. Everyone else is lesser than her." I waited. This was Emily's realization to have, not mine to force. "Last week, Brandon and I had a fight. Nothing huge, just a normal married people disagreement about money. I mentioned it to Diane, and she..." Emily's voice got smaller. She said, "That's what happens when you marry someone who wasn't raised with proper values." She said Brandon got his financial irresponsibility from his father, and it was my job to train him out of it. She said it like Brandon was a dog that needed correction. "How did that make you feel?" I asked. "Uncomfortable. Really uncomfortable." And I started thinking about all the other things she said, about you, about my friends, about people at church. There's always a judgment, always a ranking, and she's always at the top. Our food arrived, simple sandwiches, nothing fancy. We ate in silence for a moment. "The thing is," Emily continued, "her life looks perfect, but it's not happy. You know what I've never seen in that beautiful house? Laughter. Robert barely talks. When Diane's friends come over, they all sound like they're competing with each other instead of enjoying each other. Everything is a performance." She looked at me then, really looked at me. "Your house isn't fancy. The furniture is old. The kitchen is outdated. You shop at discount stores. But Mom, it's happy. It was always happy. I just forgot that happiness matters more than granite countertops." I felt something loosen in my chest. "I'm glad you're seeing this, Emily. But I need you to understand this can't keep happening. You can't keep pushing me away and then pulling me back when you realize you need me. I'm not a security blanket you can put in a closet until you want it again." I know, and I'm so sorry." She reached across the table and took my hand. "I want to fix this. Really fix it. I want to go back to having lunch every other Wednesday. I want to call you when things happen in my life, good or bad. I want my mom back. I'm here," I said. "But Emily, I'm different now. I'm not going to shrink myself to fit into your life anymore. If you want me there, I need to actually be there, not as a backup plan, not as free labor, as your mother." "Yes," she said. "Yes, that's what I want too." We finished our lunch, and for the first time in months, the conversation flowed naturally. We talked about her job, my painting class, a book we'd both read. It felt like coming home, cautious but real. I allowed myself to hope. That hope lasted exactly 11 days. The crisis came 2 days before Christmas. Emily called me at work, her voice high and panicked in a way that made my stomach drop. "Mom, I need you to come to the house, right now. Please." "What's wrong? Are you hurt?" "No. Please come." I can't explain on the phone. I left work early, my mind racing through possibilities. I pulled up to her townhouse to find Diane's car in the driveway and every light in the house blazing even though it was only 3 in the afternoon. Emily opened the door before I could knock. Her eyes were red, her face blotchy. "She's in the living room," she said. "She won't leave." I followed Emily inside and found a scene I could never have predicted. Diane was sitting on the couch, surrounded by shopping bags from expensive stores. She was crying, actually crying, tears running down her face and smudging her perfect makeup. Robert stood near the window, his expression blank. "What's going on?" I asked. "Tell her," Emily said to Robert, her voice shaking. "Tell her what you told us." Robert looked at his wife, then away. When he spoke, his voice was flat, almost mechanical. "I've been laid off. The company is downsizing. My severance will cover about 3 months of expenses, maybe 4 if we're very careful." Diane let out a sob that sounded more like a wail. "We can't live on that. Do you know how expensive our lifestyle is? The house payment, the car payments, the country club dues, we can't afford any of it anymore," Robert said. "I've been trying to tell you that for the past 2 hours. We're going to have to make significant changes. Sell the house, probably. Move somewhere smaller. Downsize everything. This is all your fault." Diane turned on him, her grief transforming into rage in an instant. "You promised me security. You said I'd never have to worry." "I was laid off, Diane. It happens. I didn't choose this. We won't be poor," she hissed. "We can't be poor. Do you know what people will say? Do you know how embarrassing?" "Mom." Brandon's voice was quiet but firm. He'd been standing in the doorway, and I hadn't even seen him. "Dad lost his job. This isn't about you being embarrassed." Diane turned her fury on her son. "You don't understand what this means." "We'll lose everything. The house Emily loves, the neighborhood, our standing in the community, the house I love." Emily's voice rose. "I never said I loved your house. You pushed me to move here so I'd be close to you. Brandon and I wanted something cheaper, something we could actually afford on our salaries, but you insisted because I wanted better for you, because I wanted you to have a real life, not the poverty your mother provided." The room went silent. "Excuse me?" I said, my voice dangerously quiet. Diane's eyes went wide, like she'd forgotten I was there. But she didn't apologize. Instead, she straightened her spine and met my gaze with defiance. "You know it's true, Catherine. You raised Emily in that sad little house, scraping by, teaching her to be satisfied with less. I gave her a vision of something more, something better. And now," her voice broke again, "now I can't even provide that for my own son." "You never provided anything," I said, each word clear and deliberate. "You performed, you displayed, you consumed, but you never built anything real, and you never taught Emily anything, except how to judge people by their bank accounts. How dare you?" "Mom's right." Emily's voice was shaking but determined. "All you've taught me is how to feel inadequate, how to think that love means expensive things and appearances. But you know what? I was happier growing up in Mom's sad little house than I've been in the past year trying to live up to your standards." Diane's face crumpled. "Emily, honey, you wanted me to validate your choices. You wanted me to make you feel superior. That's all this has ever been about." "That's not true." Diane looked around wildly, seeking support. Robert had turned away to stare out the window. Brandon had his arms crossed, his face carefully neutral. I stood silently, watching. "I think you should go, Diane," Emily said. "I love you, but you need to go." "You're choosing her?" Diane pointed at me, her voice venomous. "After everything I've done for you? After I took you under my wing, taught you how to live properly, included you in my life?" "You didn't include me in your life," Emily said. "You tried to replace my life, replace my mother, replace my values. And I let you, because I was young and stupid and dazzled by things I couldn't afford. But I'm done now. Diane stood abruptly, grabbing her designer purse. You'll regret this. When you realize what you've thrown away, when you're stuck in some cheap apartment eating bargain brand food, you'll remember what I offered you. She swept out of the house, leaving Robert to trail after her with a mumbled apology. We heard her car peel out of the driveway, the sound of expensive tires on expensive pavement. Brandon let out a long breath. Well, that was intense. I'm so sorry, Emily said, looking at me with devastating clarity. Mom, I'm so sorry for all of it. You were right. About everything. I know, I said gently. But Emily, I need you to understand something. This revelation you're having, it can't just be because Diane fell off her pedestal. It has to be because you genuinely understand what matters and what doesn't. I do understand. I promise I do. I looked at my daughter, at her tear-stained face and desperate eyes, and I made a decision that surprised even me. Prove it, I said. What do you mean? Prove it? Emily asked. I mean, show me. Not with words, but with actions. Show me that you understand what you're saying. Okay, she said cautiously. How? Come, have Christmas at my house. Just you and Brandon. No expensive gifts, no catered meal, no performance. Just us, the way we used to do it. Emily glanced at Brandon, who nodded. Okay, she said. Yes, we'll be there. Christmas morning arrived cold and clear. I woke early and started cooking, nothing fancy, just the traditional recipes I'd made for years. A modest roast, mashed potatoes, the green beans Emily had always loved, rolls from my grandmother's recipe. I set my old table with my mother's china, the dishes Emily had once brought to a dinner party and been told weren't good enough. When Emily and Brandon arrived, they weren't carrying armfuls of elaborately wrapped presents. Emily held a single small box, and Brandon carried a homemade pie. I baked it myself, Brandon said shyly. It's probably terrible, but I wanted to try. I took the pie with genuine delight. It's perfect. We spent the day together, the three of us. We ate at my small table, talked without performance or pretension, laughed at Brandon's stories about his first attempts at cooking. Emily helped me wash dishes by hand. My dishwasher had broken months ago, and I hadn't had the money to fix it yet. I forgot how much I liked this, Emily said, up to her elbows in soapy water. Just being together, not worrying about impressing anyone. That's what family is supposed to be, I said. After dinner, Emily gave me the small box she'd brought. Inside was a framed photograph I'd never seen before. It was from her wedding day, but not one of the formal portraits. This was a candid shot, taken during the reception. Emily and I were dancing together, both of us laughing, my outdated mother of the bride dress not mattering at all in that moment of pure joy. I found this on the photographer's website, Emily said, in the regex folder. Diane had specifically requested that they not include any photos where you were more prominent than her. But I saw this one and I thought, this is what I want to remember. Not the perfect cake or the expensive flowers. This. I felt tears prick my eyes. Thank you. I have something else to tell you, Emily said. Brandon and I have been talking. We're going to move. My heart sank. Because of what happened with Diane? No. Well, partly. But mainly because we realized we've been living beyond our means, trying to keep up with his parents' lifestyle. We found a smaller place. A little townhouse on the east side. It's not fancy, but it's ours and we can actually afford it. We'll be about 10 minutes from you instead of across town. That's wonderful, I said, meaning it. There's more. Emily took a breath. I want to learn things from you. Real things. How to cook meals that don't require a caterer. How to budget properly. How to make a house feel like a home instead of a showroom. Will you teach me? I pulled my daughter into a hug. Of course I will. The months that followed weren't perfect, but they were real. Emily and Brandon moved into their new place, and I helped them decorate with furniture from thrift stores and artwork from discount shops. Emily came over every Wednesday for lunch again, and sometimes she brought Brandon. She started calling just to talk, not because she needed something, and most importantly, she stopped comparing. stopped measuring her life against impossible standards, started appreciating what she had instead of longing for what she didn't. I heard through family friends that Diane and Robert had indeed sold their house, moved to a smaller place in a less expensive neighborhood. Diane had gone back to work retail, someone said, which must have been humiliating for someone who'd built her identity around not working. I felt a small pang of sympathy for her, but mostly I felt relieved that her influence over my daughter had finally broken. One evening in late January, almost exactly a year after that first devastating conversation in my kitchen, Emily stopped by unexpectedly. She was carrying something wrapped in tissue paper. "I found this at an estate sale," she said, handing it to me. "I saw it and I thought of you." I unwrapped it carefully. Inside were oven mitts, vintage ones, with a cheerful sunflower pattern almost identical to the ones she'd picked out at a yard sale 15 years ago. "The old ones finally fell apart," I said, my throat tight. "I know. I noticed last time I was here, and I remembered being 12 and thinking those sunflowers were the happiest thing I'd ever seen. I remembered you letting me pick them out even though you probably thought they were ugly." "I never thought they were ugly," I said. "I thought they were perfect because you chose them." Emily sat down at my kitchen table, running her fingers over the worn wood. "I've been thinking about what Diane said. That day in my living room, when everything fell apart, she said you raised me in poverty, that you taught me to be satisfied with less." "Emily, you don't have to." "Yes, I do. Because she was wrong. You didn't teach me to be satisfied with less. You taught me that love and effort matter more than money. You taught me that a perfect home isn't about granite countertops, it's about the people inside it. You showed me every single day that real wealth isn't what you display, it's what you sacrifice for the people you love." She looked up at me, her eyes bright with tears. "You gave me everything that mattered, Mom, and I'm so sorry it took me this long to see it." I sat down across from her, taking her hands in mine. "You see it now. That's what matters. Can I ask you something? When I said all those terrible things comparing you to Diane, telling you that you weren't good enough, did you ever think about giving up on me completely?" I considered the question carefully. I thought about stepping back. I thought about protecting myself. But giving up on you? Never. You're my daughter. Even when you hurt me, even when you chose someone else's values over mine, you were still my daughter. "I don't deserve you," she whispered. "You don't have to deserve love, Emily. That's the whole point. Real love isn't something you earn with perfection or performance. It's something you give freely, even when it costs you everything." We sat in comfortable silence for a while, just being together in my small, outdated kitchen with its old appliances and discount store decorations. Through the window, I could see the first hints of spring crocuses pushing up through the last bits of snow, stubborn and beautiful. My phone buzzed with a text. It was from Linda, my friend from painting class. "Still on for Thursday? Patricia wants to try that new coffee place." Emily glanced at the phone. "You have plans?" "I do," I said. "I've been making them for myself lately. A whole life that doesn't revolve around being someone's mother or someone's emergency contact." "Good," Emily said firmly. "That's really good, Mom. You deserve that." She stayed for another hour, and we talked about small things, her work, my latest painting attempt, the neighbor's cat that had decided to adopt me, normal things, mother-daughter things, the kind of conversation that doesn't need to be impressive or sophisticated to be valuable. When she left, she hugged me tight. "I love you. And not just because you're useful or because I need something. I love you because you're my mom, and you're amazing." I watched her drive away, then went back into my small kitchen. I put on my new sunflower oven mitts and pulled out ingredients for a simple meal just for myself, because I was worth the effort, even when no one else was around to see it. The lasagna I made that night wasn't for anyone else. It was for me, a celebration of survival and boundaries, and learning to value myself even when others didn't. I ate it slowly, savoring every bite, remembering the lasagna that had gone uneaten on that terrible November afternoon. So much had changed since then. I had changed. I'd found my spine again, rediscovered my worth, built a life that didn't depend on being needed. And my daughter had changed too. She'd learned the hardest lesson that the shiniest things aren't always the most valuable, that real wealth is measured in sacrifice and presence, not in designer labels and catered parties. I didn't know what the future held. Maybe Emily would continue growing, continue choosing substance over performance. Maybe she'd backslide, sometimes people usually do. But I knew one thing for certain. I would never again shrink myself to fit into someone else's idea of who I should be. I was enough. I had always been enough. And finally, blessedly, my daughter understood that too. Spring came, and with it, new growth in my garden and in my relationship with Emily. We fell into a comfortable rhythm. Lunch every other Wednesday, occasional weekend visits, phone calls that felt natural instead of obligatory. Emily was learning to cook the way I'd taught her when she was young, rediscovering recipes she'd once dismissed as too simple or old-fashioned. One Saturday in April, she called with an unexpected question. "Mom, would you be okay if Brandon and I invited you and Diane and Robert over for dinner? Together?" I was quiet for a moment, processing. Why? Because I want to show her something. I want her to see that the life she looked down on, your life, the values you taught me, that's what real wealth looks like. And I think she might be ready to see it now. Or she might make another scene, I pointed out. Maybe, but I want to try. "Will you come?" I thought about it. Part of me wanted to refuse, to avoid the potential drama, to protect the peace I'd worked so hard to build. But another part of me, the part that had raised a daughter to be strong and forgiving when it was earned, recognized that this was Emily's way of closing the circle. "I'll come," I said. "But Emily, if she starts anything, I'll handle it. I promise." The dinner was set for the following Saturday. Emily asked me to bring just one dish, my choice. I decided on a simple apple pie, made from my grandmother's recipe, the kind of dessert that required nothing but time and love. When I arrived at Emily's townhouse, the modest one, not the expensive one near Diane's old house, I was surprised by how warm and welcoming it felt. The furniture was mismatched but charming. The decorations were handmade or thrifted, and the whole place had a lived-in comfort that the previous townhouse had never achieved. Diane and Robert arrived shortly after me. Diane looked different, older somehow, and softer around the edges. Her clothes were still nice but not designer. Her makeup was simpler. When she saw me, something complicated passed across her face. "Catherine," she said. "Just my name. Nothing more." "Diane." "Robert." I nodded politely. The evening began awkwardly, all of us trying too hard to make small talk. But then Emily served the meal she'd prepared entirely by herself. She announced with pride. It was simple food: roasted chicken, potatoes, salad, fresh bread. Nothing fancy, nothing Instagram-worthy, just good, honest cooking. "This is delicious," Robert said, and he sounded genuinely surprised. Emily beamed. "Mom taught me. Well, re-taught me. I'd forgotten so much." Diane pushed food around her plate, not eating much. I watched her carefully, seeing the tension in her shoulders, the tightness around her mouth. Finally, midway through the meal, she set down her fork. "I need to say something," she announced. The table went quiet. "I need to apologize. To both of you." She looked at Emily, then at me. I was wrong. About so many things. "Mom," Brandon started. But Diane held up her hand. "No, let me finish. Please." She took a shaky breath. "When Robert lost his job, when we lost everything we'd built or thought we'd built, I realized something. All those things I valued, all those standards I held everyone to, they were just air, performance, ego. When it all disappeared, I had nothing left. No real friends, because I'd spent years judging everyone instead of connecting with them. No real skills, because I'd never actually learned to do anything, just to purchase things. No real peace." She looked at me directly for the first time. "You had something I didn't understand, Catherine. You had real wealth, not money, but substance. You raised Emily to be capable and strong. You showed her that love means sacrifice and presence, not perfection. And I tried to undo all of that because I was threatened by it. I didn't speak. I just listened. I'm working retail now," Diane continued. and I could hear the effort it took her to admit it. At a department store. It's humbling. Actually, it's humiliating, but it's also teaching me things. About real people, real struggles, about how most of the world actually lives. She laughed bitterly. Turns out, most people can't afford the lifestyle I was teaching Emily to aspire to. Most people are like you, working hard, making do, finding joy in simple things. There's no shame in that, I said quietly. I know that now. I didn't then. Diane's eyes filled with tears. Emily, I'm sorry I tried to replace your mother. I'm sorry I made you feel like her love and her life weren't good enough. Catherine, I'm sorry I disrespected you, judged you, tried to erase your influence on your own daughter. The silence that followed was heavy but not hostile. Thank you for saying that, I finally said. I appreciate your apology. Do you forgive me? Diane asked, her voice small. I thought about it honestly. I'm working on it. Forgiveness takes time, especially when the hurt went deep, but I appreciate your honesty, and I respect that you're trying to make amends. Diane nodded, wiping her eyes. That's more than fair. Emily reached across the table and took her mother-in-law's hand. I forgive you, Diane, but I need you to understand something. My mom is my mom. You can be in my life, and I want you to be, but not as a replacement, not as a competitor. Just as my mother-in-law. Can you do that? Yes, Diane said. Yes, I can do that. The rest of the evening was easier. Not perfect, there were still awkward moments, still remnants of old hurt hovering at the edges of conversation. But there was also laughter, genuine connection, the beginning of something healthier. When we were leaving, Diane pulled me aside. I know I don't deserve this, she said. But would you be willing to teach me some of the things you know? I don't know how to cook properly. I don't know how to make a home feel warm instead of just expensive. I don't know how to live on a budget or find joy in simple things. And I'm tired of not knowing. I looked at this woman who had caused me so much pain, who had tried to steal my daughter's affection, who had belittled everything I valued. She looked back at me with humility I'd never seen in her before, with genuine desire to learn and change. Okay, I said. We can start with cooking lessons. Wednesday afternoons, at my house. Emily can join us if she wants. Diane's face lit up with relief and gratitude. Thank you. Really, thank you. The cooking lessons became a weekly tradition. Diane, Emily, and I would gather in my small kitchen, and I would teach them the things my mother had taught me: how to make soup from scraps, how to stretch a grocery budget, how to turn simple ingredients into comfort. At first, Diane struggled. She was used to following recipes from expensive cookbooks, used to having every specialized tool, used to perfection, learning to improvise, to make do with what was available, to create something good rather than something showroom-worthy. It didn't come naturally to her, but she kept trying. And slowly, she started to understand. One Wednesday in late May, we were making bread together. Diane's hands were covered in flour, her expensive manicure ruined, her hair coming loose from its careful style. She was kneading dough with increasing confidence, and suddenly she started laughing. What's funny? Emily asked. This, Diane said, gesturing at herself. 6 months ago, I would have been horrified by this. Flour all over me, standing in a kitchen that doesn't have granite countertops, making bread that costs $3 instead of buying the artisan loaf for $12. But you know what? This is the happiest I've been in years. She looked at me, her eyes bright. You were right, Catherine. All of it. Real wealth isn't what you display. It's what you build, what you share, what you create with your own hands. I nodded. Now you understand. I'm still learning, she said. I have a lot of damage to undo, a lot of relationships to repair, but I'm grateful you're giving me the chance. Emily watched us work together, and I could see the healing happening in her too. She wasn't caught in the middle anymore, wasn't torn between two versions of motherhood. She could love us both, learn from us both, without it being a competition. That evening, after Diane and Robert had left, and Emily and Brandon were getting ready to go home, Emily pulled me aside. You know what I realized today? She said. You gave Diane grace she didn't deserve. You let her back in even though she hurt you. Why? Because that's what real strength looks like, I said. It's not holding on to hurt forever. It's not demanding that people stay in the doghouse to prove you're powerful. Real strength is knowing your worth so deeply that you can afford to be generous, can afford to offer second chances when they're genuinely earned. You're amazing, Emily said, hugging me. I'm so lucky you're my mom. I'm lucky you're my daughter, I replied. Even when you're struggling, even when you make mistakes, you're still the best thing I ever created. 2 months later, on a bright July afternoon, my phone rang with Emily's number. Mom, she said, her voice strange and tight. Can you come over? I have something to tell you. My heart jumped. Fear and hope tangled together. Are you okay? I'm fine. Better than fine. Just come over, please. I drove to her townhouse, my mind racing through possibilities. When I arrived, Emily and Brandon were sitting on their modest couch, holding hands, both of them looking nervous and excited. What's going on? I asked. Emily smiled, tears already starting. You're going to be a grandmother. I sat down hard on the nearest chair, my legs suddenly unable to support me. You're pregnant? 12 weeks. We waited to tell anyone until we were past the first trimester. Emily's hand moved to her belly, protective and tender. We're due in January. I started crying. Happy tears, grateful tears, overwhelmed tears. Oh, sweetheart. That's wonderful. That's so wonderful. There's something else, Brandon said. Something we want to ask you. Emily took a breath. We want you to be really involved, Mom. Not just grandma visits on holidays. Really involved teaching this baby the things you taught me, sharing your recipes and your values and your wisdom. Will you do that? Of course. I managed through tears. Of course I will. We're going to ask Diane too, Emily added. She's changed so much, and I think she'll be a good grandmother if she stays on this path. But Mom, you're the one we're modeling our parenting after. You're the one we trust to show us what really matters. I couldn't speak. I just pulled my daughter into a hug and held her while we both cried happy tears. That evening, I sat alone in my kitchen, the same kitchen where Emily had once told me I wasn't good enough, where she'd rejected my lasagna and my life and my values. I looked at my mother's china in the cabinet, at my new sunflower oven mitts hanging by the stove, at the photos on my refrigerator of Emily and me laughing together. I thought about the journey we'd been on, the hurt, the distance, the painful realization that love sometimes means stepping back and letting people make their own mistakes, the boundary setting, the self-respect, the refusal to be treated as less than I was worth. I thought about Diane's transformation, about how hitting bottom had opened her eyes to what really mattered, about second chances and grace, and the difference between forgiveness and being a doormat. Most of all, I thought about Emily, about the daughter I'd raised with so much love and sacrifice, who had temporarily lost her way but found it again, who had learned that real wealth isn't measured in designer labels and catered parties, but in homemade meals and sincere apologies and hands covered in flour. My phone buzzed with a text from Emily. Thank you for never giving up on me. Thank you for showing me what real strength looks like. I love you, Mom. I texted back, I love you too, always have, always will. Then I stood up and started making dinner just for myself, because I was worth the effort. I put on my sunflower oven mitts and smiled, remembering the 12-year-old girl who'd picked them out because they looked happy. She'd been right. They were happy. And so, finally, was I. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for being here.